Hey strangers, thanks for stopping by and spending your time with us. Before we start, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy it, don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's begin. Section 1. The Wall. You ever spend so long staring at the same wall that it starts to feel like part of you? I did. 6 years. Solace Correctional Facility. Middle of nowhere, surrounded by forests and hills that might as well have been another planet. You stop thinking of time as hours or days. It just becomes noise. Lights turning on, lights turning off, the same voices, the same meals, the same air recycled through the same vents. After a while, you don't even dream about freedom. You just dream about difference, about change, a breeze that doesn't smell like disinfectant, rain that doesn't echo off concrete. My name's Eli Mercer. I wasn't a bad man, not really. I made a bad decision, an armed robbery that got messy. No one got hurt, but it was enough to lock me away long enough to forget what life felt like. Solace wasn't a normal prison. It was experimental, self-sufficient, they said. The kind of place the government built when they wanted to prove punishment could be sustainable. They grew food in greenhouses, had water treatment systems, solar panels. It was cut off from the grid, meant to run entirely on its own. It was a prison pretending to be a city, but a city with walls too high to ever see past. For 6 years, I told myself I'd serve my time, keep my head down, and walk out the front gate like a man reborn. That fantasy kept me alive longer than it should have. Then one morning they told us the parole reviews were temporarily suspended. No explanation, no new dates, just indefinite delay. That's when the idea started to eat at me. Escape. It wasn't bravery that pushed me. It was claustrophobia, the kind that gets under your skin until you can't breathe. You look at the walls and feel them pressing closer. You hear the locks click, and it feels like they're inside your head. I didn't want to run, but one night I realized I couldn't stay. I started watching the guards, noticing patterns, where they smoked, when they changed shifts, the ones who stayed too long on break. I noticed which lights flickered, which doors jammed, where the cameras didn't quite line up. The more I looked, the more I saw. Solace ran on routine, and routine was a kind of blindness. Once you're predictable, you stop noticing what's right in front of you. That became my advantage. It took me months. A loose vent cover behind the workshop, a corridor that wasn't on the maintenance map, a chain-link section of the perimeter that rusted through, hidden behind storage sheds. It was there, the smallest flaw in the design. All I had to do was step through it. But when the night finally came, I almost didn't go. Freedom sounds simple when you're behind bars, but when you're staring at it, when all that weight of what-ifs sits on your shoulders, it's something else entirely. If I got caught, they'd bury me in solitary until my mind turned to dust. If I made it, maybe I'd see the city again. Maybe I'd find out if my sister still lived where she used to. Maybe I'd breathe real air. I waited until lights out. The halls went quiet except for the low, electric hum that never stopped. My heart was louder than my footsteps. Through the vents, past the kitchen, down the side corridor where the cameras didn't quite reach. Every inch felt like a lifetime. When I reached the outer fence, I froze. The wind was cold and still. The towers were dark. No guards, not even a flashlight beam. I figured they'd rotated the shift, or maybe I'd gotten lucky. I cut through the outer mesh. The metal snapped under the bolt cutters like brittle glass. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped them. And then I was out. No alarms, no sirens, no shouting, just nothing. I crouched low in the grass, waiting for the sound of boots or engines. Nothing came. I ran. I didn't know where. Just away. Through the trees, over the ridge, into the dark. The night air hit my face like I'd been underwater for years and finally broke the surface. It smelled strange, like dust and metal. But it was real. It was outside. For the first time in 6 years, there was no wall between me and the world. I looked back at Solace, that gray fortress half hidden in the valley, expecting lights to flare, floodlights to sweep, guards to pour out. But it just sat there, still, quiet. The prison that had swallowed years of my life didn't even notice I was gone. So, I kept walking. The dirt road wound through forest so thick it felt untouched by people. No tire marks, no litter, no sound but wind. Every shadow looked alive because for the first time I was somewhere that could be alive. My legs hurt, my throat burned, my heart raced, but it didn't matter because I was free. At least, that's what I thought. I remember laughing, actually laughing, when I reached the first sign of civilization, a rusted metal post barely standing, half covered in vines. The name was too faded to read. I didn't care. Civilization meant safety. I told myself I'd find a phone, call my sister, turn myself in if I had to. Anything was better than concrete and silence. That's what I thought freedom would sound like. But the silence didn't go away. It followed me. Thicker. Heavier. I didn't know it yet. Couldn't have known it. But when I left those gates behind, I wasn't walking toward people. I was walking away from them. And soon I'd find out just how far away meant. Section 2. The Road. I always imagined freedom as noise. Traffic, music, arguments on street corners, life spilling into every crack of the world. But the further I walked, the more I understood. Freedom was quiet. Too quiet. The dirt road from Solace snaked down through pine trees and broken hills. Morning light had just started bleeding through the clouds, and for the first time in years, I watched the sun rise without bars between us. It should have felt beautiful. It didn't. The air had a strange weight to it, dry, heavy, almost metallic. Birds should have been singing. Somewhere there should have been insects buzzing, animals moving. But there was nothing. Not even a breeze strong enough to stir the leaves. The silence pressed down until my ears rang. I told myself it was just the isolation. Too much time in that concrete box, my senses needing time to wake up. So I focused on practical things: food, shelter, direction. I had 2 protein bars, a half-empty bottle of water, and no map. But I knew there had to be a town nearby. Hillcrest, maybe 10 miles east. That name had been stamped on the supply crates back when Solace still got shipments. If there were crates, there had to be people. So I walked. Hours passed. The forest thinned, replaced by open fields. Grass grew tall and pale, swaying without sound. Fences lay collapsed, wood rotted. And then, through the haze, I saw rooftops. I laughed under my breath. Actual rooftops. Civilization! The road widened into asphalt, cracked and faded, but real. I followed it until I reached a sign. Tilted, the paint flaking away. Hillcrest. Population 22,400. Below that, someone had spray-painted a single word. Sorry. I stared at it too long. Then I told myself it didn't matter. Someone must have vandalized it years ago. Small town boredom, that's all. But when I crossed the city limits, the first thing I noticed was the smell. I stared at it too long. Then I told myself it didn't matter. Someone must have vandalized it years ago. Small town boredom, that's all. But when I crossed the city limits, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not death, not rot, just dust. Like everything had been left to dry out. Cars sat abandoned in the middle of the streets, doors open. Some still had keys in the ignition. Windows were down. Rain had long since stained the seats. A traffic light blinked yellow above an empty intersection, the bulb flickering every few seconds as if it was struggling to remember its purpose. I kept walking, expecting, hoping to hear a voice. A door closing, a dog barking, anything. There was nothing. The world looked paused mid-breath. I passed a diner, Sonny's Place, its front window cracked, the neon sign still hanging on by one buzzing tube. Inside, plates of half-eaten food sat on tables, covered in dust. A cup of coffee solidified into sludge. A newspaper headline dated, I don't even know. The print was too faded, but the year ended in a 5. I just didn't know which 5. Hello? My voice bounced back. I hadn't heard my own echo in years, and somehow that was more frightening than the silence. I moved from building to building, trying every door. Most were unlocked. Shops full of goods, shelves stocked, clothing stores with displays still arranged like someone expected customers tomorrow. It should have felt like treasure. It felt like trespassing. In one house, I found a kitchen table still set for dinner. 2 plates, forks laid neatly on napkins, a candle burnt down to nothing. No sign of struggle, no sign of life. Just absence. I stepped outside and realized I'd stopped hearing even my own footsteps. The air was thick, soundless, dense. That was when the fear really began to sink in. I climbed a small hill near the center of town to get a better view. From up there, I could see everything. Streets, houses, the water tower, the school. It was all there, all intact, and completely dead. No smoke from chimneys, no movement, nothing mechanical, nothing human. It looked like the world had taken one collective breath and never exhaled. I sat on the curb and opened one of my bars. The taste was chemical, bitter, but I forced it down. I told myself maybe the town had been evacuated. Maybe there'd been a chemical leak, or a storm, or a war. But then I looked up at the sky, clear, empty, soft gray, and realized there was no sign of catastrophe, no destruction, no burn marks, no decay. Just stillness. Perfect, terrifying stillness. I walked until my legs ached. The main street looped back onto itself like the town was a circle with no exits. Finally, I stopped in front of a police station. If anyone had stayed behind, they'd have been here. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was frozen mid-shift. Desks full of paperwork, coffee cups, a corkboard covered in wanted posters, and behind the counter, a radio. I nearly cried when I saw it. I flicked it on. The light came alive, faint, flickering. I turned the knob slowly, scanning for any sound that didn't belong to me. Static. More static. And then, for a half second, a voice. Testing. Station 4. Repeat. If anyone... Then silence again. I shouted into the mic. This is Hillcrest! Hello? Is anyone there? Nothing. The signal never returned. I sank into the chair, staring at the empty cells behind me. The irony didn't hit me until later, that I'd escaped a prison, only to sit in another one, built by ghosts. As the sun began to fall, I realized something else. I hadn't seen a single sign of wildlife. No dogs, no cats, no birds. Nothing alive. Just me. That was the moment it truly hit. The kind of cold that starts in your stomach and spreads until you can't breathe. I wasn't free. I wasn't even out. I just traded one kind of isolation for another. A prison with no guards, no rules, and no one left to share it with. I spent the night inside that police station, every sound making me flinch, every creak of the building reminding me that silence wasn't safety anymore. It was something else. Something bigger. When I finally closed my eyes, I thought about Solace, that fortress I'd cursed for years, the only place still running, still functioning, still full of people. And I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I'd made a terrible mistake. Section 3. The Silence of Noon. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time my eyes closed, I heard things that weren't there. Footsteps in the hall, doors creaking open, whispers behind me. The kind of trick silence plays when you're alone too long. By morning, my throat was raw. My heart still beat too fast. The police station looked different in daylight, less haunted, more abandoned. The sunlight poured through dirty windows, making dust float like ash. I found a cabinet in the break room, stocked with expired rations, canned beans, some water bottles, a few energy drinks that tasted like battery acid. I stuffed them into a duffel bag from the evidence locker. If the town was truly empty, I couldn't afford to stay still. Somewhere, someone had to be alive. That voice on the radio, it hadn't been a hallucination. I was sure of it. Station 4, it had said. That could mean another town, another police outpost. I just needed to find a map. I spent 2 hours searching every drawer, every glove box of every car I passed. Nothing. The gas pumps were dry. The vending machines were full but dead. Everything was preserved. Not ruined. Just stopped. Around noon, I reached the outskirts of Hillcrest, the part with small farms and warehouses. The sky was a pale white, like it couldn't decide whether to rain or burn. The wind picked up, but it didn't carry any sound. That's when I found the first real sign of what might have happened. A farmhouse, its front door wide open, curtains moving in slow waves. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged, shoes by the door, pictures on the wall, dishes still in the sink, but on the kitchen table was something different. A note. Folded, yellowed at the edges. If you're reading this, we waited too long. The trucks stopped coming. The phones died. We thought it would blow over, but it didn't. The air burned our throats that last night. We're going north. Follow the water. M. I read it twice, maybe 3 times, trying to make sense of it. The air burned our throats. What did that mean? Radiation? Gas? Some kind of disaster? But the air felt fine now. Thin, dry, but breathable. My skin wasn't burning, my lungs were clear. Maybe it had passed. Maybe people really had gone north. I stepped outside, shielding my eyes from the glare. The farm stretched for miles, every crop long dead, the soil cracked like it had been scorched. Yet there were no signs of fire, no ash, no charred wood, no melted glass, just absence again. Then I saw something glinting in the dirt near the well, a metallic shape, half buried. I brushed it off. A gas mask. Civilian grade, scratched and useless, the kind sold in emergency stores for earthquakes or riots. I looked around. If people needed masks, then something had poisoned the world. I glanced at the horizon. The air shimmered faintly, a heat haze or maybe something else. I couldn't tell. Whatever it was, it made the world look like it was breathing, like the land itself was alive in a way it shouldn't be. I followed the dirt road past the farm, past a row of mailboxes bent and rusted. The ground sloped down toward what looked like an industrial area. A sign read, Hillcrest Water Treatment Plant. If people went north following the water, maybe they'd come through here. Maybe someone stayed behind to monitor it. The front gate was open. No vehicles, no guards, no locks. Inside, the smell hit me first, wet concrete and mildew. The generators were silent. Control panels were still blinking faintly, running on residual power. And across one wall, someone had spray painted in large red letters, "Do not drink." The main control room was empty, except for papers scattered across the floor. Test results, chemical analyses, most of it was unreadable. But a few pages mentioned words I hadn't seen in years. Contaminant, airborne, unclassified compound, sustained exposure risk. Whatever had happened, it wasn't natural. I turned on one of the monitors. The screens flickered, showing static, then grainy camera feeds from outside the facility. One of them caught my eye, a road leading north, and on the far edge of the frame, a vehicle, still. It looked like a transport truck, military maybe, half sunk into the dirt. My pulse kicked up. I grabbed my bag and headed out. It took nearly an hour to reach it. The truck was larger than I'd thought, a reinforced carrier, the kind used for supply convoys. The tires had fused with the ground, the paint stripped by years of wind. The driver's door hung open. Inside were crates, metal, sealed tight. I pried one open with a crowbar from the roadside. Inside, oxygen tanks. Another, medical kits, all expired. And in the back of the cab, tucked under a blanket, a small plastic tablet with a cracked screen. I pressed the power button, and against all odds, it flickered to life. A logo. Then, text. Solace Correctional Facility, Supply Unit 4, Last delivery logged, 8/17/25. Status, canceled. I stared at the date. I'd been inside Solace long after that. So what had the staff been using all that time? The answer hit slow, like a bruise spreading under the skin. The prison's self-sufficient systems, food, water, energy. They'd told us it was innovation. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was containment. Whatever happened out here, Solace had sealed itself off from it, and I just walked out of the only place on Earth that might have survived. I sank to my knees, the tablet screen still glowing weakly in the dirt. The irony was too much to bear. I'd spent 6 years plotting to get out. 6 years imagining open skies, busy streets, real life. Now I was free, in a world that had forgotten how to live. That night I camped near the water plant, too scared to go back to the city, but too lost to keep walking. I lit a small fire in a rusted barrel, watching the flames twist in the still air. Every few minutes, I thought I heard something in the distance, a low hum, like an engine, or maybe just the wind. I kept staring north, toward the mountains, toward the river, toward whatever came next. I told myself there had to be others, survivors, people who followed the water like the note said. I had to believe that, because if there weren't, then I'd escaped a prison only to enter a graveyard. Section 4. The Stranger. The next morning, I left the water plant early, moving cautiously along the cracked road that led north. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the earth itself was watching. The truck, the note, the empty houses, it all pressed down on me. And yet I had to keep moving. I had to see if anyone was really out there. I hadn't gone far when I saw smoke. Thin, spiraling, almost delicate against the morning haze. My first thought was relief. Finally, someone, alive, someone human. But relief came with a spike of fear. After everything I'd seen, every dead town, every empty street, I didn't trust it. Whoever it was could be anything. Desperate, dangerous, or worse, waiting. I crouched behind a fallen signpost and crept forward. The smoke came from a small clearing, and in its center was a fire pit. Flames flickering weakly. A figure was kneeling beside it, hunched over some metal contraption. Tools scattered at their feet. I called out, trying to sound calm. "Hello?" The figure froze. Slowly, they turned around. Eyes wide, face obscured by a ragged scarf and goggles. I froze too. My pulse thumped in my ears. "Who's there?" The voice asked, cautiously, warily. Not hostile, but not friendly either. "My name's Eli," I said. I'm just passing through." The figure studied me, then lowered a small crowbar. "Eli, huh?" I blinked. "You know me?" A faint laugh, dry and short. "Saw your face in the yard once. Solace, D block." I relaxed slightly. Solace. Someone who had been inside the same walls. That meant, maybe, trust. Or maybe, danger. "I'm Calvin," he said. "Calvin Reyes, and you're far from the prison now." I nodded. "Yeah, too far to go back, I guess." He tilted his head, eyes scanning the horizon. "Too far to turn back and live, maybe. Or die trying." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a warning. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. How do you speak to someone when the world itself has disappeared? Calvin finally gestured at the fire. "Sit. Don't get too close, though. I don't trust anyone right away, especially after what I've seen." I lowered myself to the ground, keeping a safe distance. He was right. After Hillcrest, after the water plant, after all the empty towns, trust was fragile. We didn't talk much at first. I watched him move, assessing every motion, every glance. He was careful, deliberate, alert. He'd been living here a while, though not long enough to be comfortable. Maybe a few weeks, enough to know the rules of this new world. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. What happened to everyone? I asked, trying not to sound desperate. Calvin didn't answer right away. He poked at the fire with a stick, making the flames jump. Finally, he said, "I don't know. Not really. I saw towns abandoned, roads empty, supplies untouched. The air's fine, but people aren't." I swallowed. No one? No one. His tone flat, factual. Yet something in the way he said it suggested fear lurking underneath, the same fear I felt. We ate in silence, sharing the little I had scavenged, stale crackers, half a bottle of water. He offered me some dried meat, barely enough for a meal, but I took it. Hunger didn't wait for caution. Afterwards, we sat by the fire, and Calvin finally spoke. "You don't know me. I don't know you. But out here," he let the words hang. "Sometimes that doesn't matter. Sometimes having someone to watch your back is enough." I wanted to believe him, but a small voice in the back of my head whispered, he could be dangerous. Desperate people do dangerous things. What if he led me into a trap? What if I followed him and ended up like the abandoned towns themselves, gone without a trace? I decided to wait. Test him. See if he kept the fire burning. If he scavenged during the day. If he moved when it was safe and stayed put when it wasn't. By nightfall, I realized something. I didn't have a choice. I could keep walking alone, risking everything out there, or I could take a chance and follow him north, toward the river, toward whatever hope might remain. So I stayed, and I watched him.
Section 5. The Choice. I woke before dawn, the fire reduced to glowing embers. Calvin was already moving, crouched near the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon. I realized then that out here, every day started like a hunt. You woke up alive, and that alone counted as luck. We didn't speak at first. Words were unnecessary until they were. Every sound could carry. Every shadow could hide something we didn't want to see. Instead, we packed what little we had, my duffel bag, his few supplies, the crowbar, and a small flashlight that flickered with a dying battery. "You sure you want to do this?" Calvin finally asked. His voice was low, almost careful, as if saying it out loud made it more real. I nodded. "I don't know what else to do. I can't go back." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Solace was a fortress. If we went back, we'd be caught, punished, worse. And in a world like this, I had no illusions about what worse meant. We stepped onto the road in silence. The dawn mist hung thick, making the abandoned towns look like ruins of another time. Hillcrest behind us, the world ahead. I tried to imagine someone, anyone, still alive out there, but the emptiness swallowed the thought. Hours passed, the silence stretched. Each building we passed added weight to my chest. Homes left in mid-motion, cars abandoned, playgrounds frozen in time. Calvin never slowed, never rushed, just moved deliberately, eyes scanning. I tried to do the same, but every shadow made me jump. "You trust me yet?" I asked finally, keeping my voice low. Calvin glanced at me, eyebrow raised. "Trust? You don't know me, and I don't know you. But I'm not going to kill you for food." I laughed dryly, more from tension than humor. "Not yet, anyway."
That earned a small smirk from him, a moment of humanity. We stopped at the edge of another small town, nothing larger than a collection of houses, a post office, and a dry creek. The buildings were intact, the streets were empty, and the creek was dry, cracked mud splitting under the heat of the late morning sun. We needed water. Both of us had been rationing. I suggested searching the houses. Calvin hesitated. We moved together. One watches, one searches. Keep your eyes open. I nodded. The old rules of survival returned automatically. Split up, keep a line of sight, cover each other. Even with another person, the world demanded caution. Inside one of the houses, I found a few unopened water bottles in the kitchen. Small victories. Calvin found a first aid kit in the bathroom, mostly intact. Neither of us spoke much while gathering supplies. Action felt safer than conversation. When we stepped outside, movement on the far street caught my eye. A shadow? A trick of the light? I pointed, heart hammering. Calvin froze, then slowly raised his hand to signal stop. We crouched behind a burned-out car. Nothing moved. The shadow vanished. Calvin whispered, "It's easy to imagine things out here. Easy to think there's someone waiting to hurt you. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's just the world playing tricks." I nodded, unsure if that was comforting or more terrifying. By noon, we reached a fork in the road. One path led north along a river, the other cut inland toward rolling hills. Calvin looked at me, gauging my reaction. North. That's where people would go if they were trying to survive. Water is life. I wanted to argue, to choose differently, but my gut said he was right. And so we chose together. As we walked, we passed a burned-out vehicle, barely recognizable. The tires were melted, the paint bubbled and peeled. Whoever had been here hadn't left voluntarily. My stomach churned, and I realized for the first time that survival wasn't just about finding food and water. It was about knowing what threats you couldn't see. Calvin kept talking quietly as we moved, describing safe routes, abandoned supply caches he'd discovered in the hills. His knowledge reassured me and reminded me I had nothing of my own. I had escaped Solace, expecting freedom, but freedom didn't come with survival skills. I noticed him watching me too, watching how I moved, how I reacted to every shadow, every sudden noise. I couldn't tell if he was assessing me, protecting me, or preparing for the moment I became a liability. And then I realized that was how it was now. The world had changed. Out here, you didn't just survive the environment, you survived the people, too. By nightfall, we set up camp near a stand of trees beside the river. The air was cooler, the silence less suffocating than during the day. Calvin kept the fire low, always scanning. I kept my backpack close, hands hovering over the crowbar, ready for anything. Neither of us said much, but the unspoken understanding was clear. We were partners because we had to be, not because we trusted each other. And that was enough, for now. As I stared into the flames, I thought about Solace, about the world I had imagined waiting for me outside. I thought about the empty towns, the dry creeks, the shadows that vanished as quickly as they appeared. I had escaped a prison, but I was still trapped in a world that might not have room for anyone alive. And as the fire cracked and sparks drifted into the night, I realized the choice we had made, to trust each other, even a little, might be the only chance either of us had to survive.
Section 6. The Other Prisoners. The night by the river passed without incident, but I didn't sleep. Not really. My mind kept replaying the empty streets, the abandoned houses, the burned-out car, and now, with Calvin nearby, the worry had shifted.
Survival wasn't just about water or food anymore. It was about people. By mid-morning, we were moving again, following the river north. The current was weak, the banks cracked and dry in places, but it offered direction and hope. Calvin kept his eyes scanning constantly, every sound drawing a twitch from his shoulders. I followed his lead, half relieved, half annoyed that I'd spent 6 years planning my escape without ever considering what survival in the real world would demand. Hours passed, and then we noticed the signs. Footprints. Not ours, not recent. They were older, sun-baked, some partially washed by the river. A trail leading off the road and into a small copse of trees. I froze. Someone's been here. Calvin crouched beside me, scanning. Not recently. Could be days. Could be weeks. Or they're still around. My voice hitched slightly. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "We stick together. Quiet. Don't make a sound." We followed the trail cautiously, keeping low, moving like shadows along the trees. The footprints led us to a small clearing where we finally saw them. 3 people. Figures crouched around a makeshift camp, tarps fashioned from tarps, a small fire smoldering weakly. One of them raised her head, scanning the tree line. I instinctively froze. My heart pounded. After weeks of silence, after seeing towns completely abandoned, I didn't know what to expect. Calvin whispered, "Could be survivors, or could be something else. Either way, we don't make the first move." The figures didn't notice us immediately. They moved carefully, almost mechanically, checking traps, adjusting supplies, talking in low tones. Something about the way they moved didn't feel human. I realized they weren't waving or calling. There was no sign of greeting, only caution. "Should we approach?" I asked. Calvin shook his head. "Not yet. Let them come to us if they're curious. Watch for signs. If they're hostile, they'll try to flank us. If they're scared, they'll run." We stayed hidden, crouched behind thick brush, observing. Time passed slowly, the kind of slow where you notice every insect, every rustle in the leaves. Every moment brought a new anxiety. One of the figures stood suddenly, facing our direction. My stomach dropped. The person didn't move toward us. They just stared. Long moments passed. Then they lowered their head, returning to the fire. Calvin exhaled softly. "They know we're here. They just don't care. Yet." We kept moving parallel to the river, maintaining distance. Every now and then we'd glimpse them through gaps in the trees. They weren't like us. Their clothes were patched together, scavenged from everywhere. They carried weapons crudely fashioned from metal and wood. Nothing like the polished equipment of soldiers, nothing like what Solace had taught us to fear. But the danger was the same: survival. By evening, the group had vanished. Whether they left or hid better, I couldn't tell. Calvin didn't comment. We kept our fire small, shadows long against the trees. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind spun with possibilities. Who were they? Friends? Enemies? Something else entirely? I looked at Calvin, dozing lightly beside me. How do we know we can trust anyone anymore? He didn't answer at first. Then, "You don't. Not out here. You trust people because you have to, not because they're good. You watch them, you test them, and if they fail, you survive anyway." I understood. In the silence, the forest around us seemed alive. Every rustle, every crack, every distant echo felt like a warning. The world had changed. Survival wasn't just about food or water. It was about caution, about understanding who might help, who might harm, and who was just gone entirely. I realized something then. The moment I had walked out of Solace, I had entered another prison, one with no walls, no guards, no rules. And the prisoners inside were unpredictable, dangerous, and possibly worse than solitude. I stared at the river, calm, empty, flowing toward some unknown horizon. And I knew, whatever happened next, trust was the one thing we couldn't afford to give freely. Section 7. The First Encounter. The next morning, the mist hung heavy along the riverbanks, curling around trees and ruins like a living thing. Calvin and I moved cautiously, staying low, every sound amplified in the eerie silence. We had seen signs of the other group, 3 figures moving in the distance, careful, watchful, but now we were about to close the gap. As we approached an abandoned bridge over the river, one of the figures stepped into view. Not from hiding, not slowly, just walked into the open, as if they'd known we were coming. Calvin froze beside me. "Don't make a move. Let them show themselves." The figure stopped mid-step, then raised his hand slowly. No weapon, no threat, at least at first glance. A woman, maybe in her late 20s, with a ragged backpack and boots caked in mud. Her eyes were sharp, scanning us with suspicion. I swallowed hard. "I'm Eli," I called. "We don't want trouble, just passing through." She tilted her head. "Passing through?" Her voice was rough, cautious. "You don't belong out here." Calvin stepped forward, hands slightly raised. "We're survivors, same as you, no one else around." Her eyes darted between us. Then, with a sudden motion, she dropped to the ground and ran toward the forest on the far side of the bridge. Instinct kicked in. I ran after her. Calvin followed, and that's when the trap revealed itself. A snare, hidden in the undergrowth, caught her foot. She yelped, sharp, painful, and fell hard. My stomach dropped. She was stuck, struggling. I rushed forward. Calvin moved quickly too, but then, a rustle in the trees, another figure appeared, carrying what looked like a club. I froze. "Get back!" Calvin shouted. The figure advanced. My mind raced. Was this an ambush? Were these people hostile? Did we stumble into something worse than solitude? Calvin lunged, grabbing the assailant's arm and twisting him to the ground. The club clattered. I reached the trapped woman, helping her free her ankle. She winced in pain, but I finally got her to her feet. We ran. Once we were hidden behind a thicket, she collapsed against a tree, clutching her leg. Blood seeped through her pants, dark against the dirt. My pulse hammered. Calvin looked at me, tense. "We need to move her. They'll come back." I nodded. The tension was palpable, every movement, every breath a test. I glanced at her, wondering if she'd betrayed us, or if this was a trap. My mind raced with doubt. She looked at me, eyes wide with fear. I'm sorry," she said, voice low, almost bitter. "I didn't know if you were one of them." I didn't know what she meant. I wanted to ask, but another sound, snapping branches, made us all freeze. We helped her toward the riverbank where we could create a temporary shelter. She was quiet, grimacing with pain, and I noticed Calvin glancing at her, suspicion lingering in his gaze. Hours passed. We patched her leg with torn fabric and duct tape we'd salvaged. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. At some point she spoke again. "You think I tried to betray you," she said, voice low, almost bitter. "I didn't. That snare, I triggered it on purpose." "On purpose?" "To protect myself. And maybe you too, if you'd gone forward. Those others, they weren't hostile to me. They were tracking us. I needed to slow them down." The truth hit slowly. My mind twisted her fear into betrayal, our mutual caution into suspicion. The betrayal I imagined had never existed. Calvin exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders.
so she saved us, not trapped us. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Out here, trust wasn't easy. It was earned in pieces, in moments, in acts of survival. And in that instant, I realized how fragile it was, and how quickly fear could cloud judgment. Night fell as we huddled near the fire we made, her leg elevated, Calvin standing watch. I glanced between them, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Not certainty, not safety, just a thread. A thread that would be tested again tomorrow, no doubt.
Section 8. The River's Path. The first light of morning spilled over the riverbank. Mist hung in the air, curling around rocks and driftwood like a living shroud. The injured survivor, her name finally revealed as Mara, leaned heavily on Calvin's shoulder. Her steps were careful, measured, every movement a negotiation with pain. I watched them from behind, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. We were a fragile unit now, 3 humans in a world that didn't seem to want any of us alive. Trust had been tested once, and though we had survived, the memory of suspicion lingered. The river ran shallow but steady, winding through the landscape like a silver ribbon. Water meant life, but it also meant exposure. Every reflection, every glint could be seen from miles away. We stayed low, moving through the thick brush along the banks, careful to leave as little trace as possible. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, the heat baking the cracked soil underfoot. Supplies were scarce. I rummaged through the bags, dividing what little we had. Some stale crackers, a half bottle of water, and a few scraps of jerky. We came across a farmhouse, small and abandoned. The roof was intact, though one shutter hung loose. I motioned to Calvin, and we approached cautiously. Mara leaned on my shoulder as we entered. Inside, the place was eerily untouched. Plates still sat on the table, cutlery laid out. A kettle rested on the stove. Dust covered everything, but it didn't feel violent, just paused. We scavenged quickly. A can of beans, a half bottle of water, and a small bag of flour. Enough for a meal, maybe 2. I found a first aid kit and added bandages for Mara's leg. Calvin found an old map tucked inside a drawer. North, that was our direction, following the river, always north. By mid-afternoon, the river narrowed, twisting through rocky terrain. A fallen tree created a natural bridge. Calvin tested it first, Mara close behind, limping but steady. I followed, gripping the crowbar for balance. Every step felt precarious, every sound magnified by the emptiness around us. Then, a sudden snap. Mara cried out sharply, clutching her leg. She had hit a sharp rock beneath the fallen tree. Pain flared across her face. I froze. Calvin rushed to her side. Blood was seeping through the fabric of her pants. My heart thudded. "We need to get her to safety," Calvin said, urgency in his voice. He lifted her gently, my hands helping steady her. We moved off the bridge, crouching behind a cluster of bushes to assess the injury. The wound wasn't deep, but it was enough to slow her down. Every step forward now required caution. Every rustle in the trees made me flinch. As we settled for a short rest, Mara looked at us, her face pale. She said, "I didn't want you to see this. I didn't want to slow us down. I could have handled it alone." Calvin shook his head. "Out here, we're stronger together. That's the only way we survive." I nodded, still catching my breath. Trust had been tested before, but now it felt like a lifeline. Every moment of suspicion, every fear of betrayal had been replaced by necessity. We had no choice but to rely on each other. And as the fire flickered, I knew tomorrow would test us again. Because in this world, freedom was just the beginning. Section 9. The Ambush. The fog along the river was thick, curling around rocks and trees like a living thing. We moved carefully, Mara leaning heavily on me, Calvin scanning ahead. I thought we were alone. We weren't. Shouts shattered the quiet. From the fog, figures emerged. 6 of them this time, not ragged survivors, but a coordinated group, moving silently, weapons at the ready. They had clearly been watching us. Each step we took, they flanked us from both sides, closing the circle. I froze. Calvin's hand rested on his crowbar, eyes sharp. Mara gasped, panic flaring in her chest. "Step away from them," the largest figure barked, voice controlled, sharp. "Hands where we can see them." Calvin stepped forward. "We don't want trouble, we're just passing through." The figures didn't relax. They knew we had no advantage. Suddenly, one of them lunged, not at me, but at Mara. She screamed, stumbling backward. I ran to grab her, but she tripped on the uneven riverbank, her leg catching at a jagged root. She went down hard, blood seeping through her pants. Time slowed. One of the attackers advanced on her. Calvin swung his crowbar, but the bank beneath us shifted, the ground crumbling toward the river. We were cornered, trapped between attackers and a collapsing riverbank. Mara cried out again. I dove toward her, grabbing her arm. The attacker came closer, swinging a metal pipe. I twisted, blocking it with the crowbar, the metal screeching. Sparks flew where the pipe scraped the rocks. Then it happened. One of our own moved in a blur. Calvin grabbed Mara and pushed her to safety, ducking behind her. Another attacker swung at him, and he took the blow across his shoulder. Pain flared, but he stayed on his feet. In the chaos, one of the attackers tumbled toward the river. The current was shallow, but strong enough to sweep him into the rocks. A scream. Silence. We scrambled, dragging Mara away from the edge. I glanced at Calvin, sweat, blood, and exhaustion streaking his face. His eyes met mine, and for a second I wondered if he had acted selfishly, left me to deal with the attackers to save her. We hid behind a fallen tree as the fog rolled past. I realized my pulse had slowed, but the fear hadn't. Calvin was tense, Mara pale and shaking. For a moment, I didn't know who I could trust. Did he? I whispered, heart hammering. Did he leave me? Calvin shook his head slowly. No, he said. I risked myself to protect her, to protect all of us. That's the difference. Mara looked at him, tears streaking her dust-covered face. I thought I'd have to fend for myself, but he risked everything. Relief crashed through me, mingled with guilt. Out here, trust wasn't given lightly. It was earned in chaos, in danger, in choices made under pressure. By nightfall, we reached a ridge overlooking the river, bruised, bleeding, shaken. The attackers hadn't followed. Exhausted, we camped near a narrow bend. Calvin kept watch, while Mara and I rested, tending to wounds. For the first time since leaving Solace, hope flickered in me. Not certainty, not safety, just survival. And the knowledge that trust, fragile, tested, imperfect, could be enough to keep us alive. Section 10. The Horizon. We had followed the river for days, each step heavier than the last. Mara's leg had healed enough to walk, but the journey had taken its toll. Our supplies were low, our bodies ached. And yet the ridge overlooking the valley ahead gave me pause. In the distance, through the mist and fading light, we saw it. Another prison. Not crumbling, not abandoned, but intact. Towers, walls, signs of a carefully maintained compound. Lights flickered faintly, thin columns of smoke rising from chimneys.
Another bastion of humanity, one that had survived the collapse. We stopped, letting the view sink in. Silence hung between us. Mara spoke first, voice small, almost a whisper. "Another Solace?" Calvin's jaw tightened. He scanned the horizon, calculating, thinking. Maybe, or something similar, maybe better, safer, but it's still a prison, just walls with a different name. I swallowed hard. For weeks I had dreamed of freedom, of leaving the walls behind, of a life that wasn't dictated by guards, rules, or schedules. And now, seeing this new prison, I realized something. Freedom didn't exist out here either. Not yet. Mara looked at me, a spark of determination in her eyes. So, we stop hoping for happiness outside? We make it ourselves. Calvin's gaze lingered on the distant walls. We plan, we learn, we prepare. One day we take one of these places, and we build something better. A city for the living, not the controlled. A place where we're not prisoners of the past. I nodded, heart racing. The idea was bold, dangerous, nearly impossible. But for the first time since I escaped Solace, I felt something that wasn't fear. Possibility. The three of us sat on the ridge, staring at the prison on the horizon. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. The valley below lay quiet, deceptive in its beauty. And as night fell, a thought struck me. The world outside may be dead, but we weren't. And maybe, just maybe, humanity's next chapter would be written by people who refused to be prisoners. We didn't speak the words aloud, but we all thought the same thing. Tomorrow we plan. Tomorrow we take the first step. The horizon was our challenge. The world outside was dangerous, empty, uncertain. But together, we might just change it.